I'm going to hand you over to Greg and Maxwell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening. Right, so we were out in Denver last week and we saw the first of the 3D data that we acquired in October. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the company and how we're working forward with that data. Executive summary, so Rose is transitioning from mining, disposing of those assets, generating some cash flow, and we're now focusing on the property in the Paradox Basin in Utah, which we acquired by earning a 75% working interest via Rocky Standard Oil Company. So this is the Gunnison Valley unit, that's the area that we're into, and it's within the Paradox Basin. So there's a couple of key names here. The Cane Creek unit is the primary reservoir, and that's analogous to the Cane Creek field, which is just to the south. That's already had some production in the play that we were targeting. So this 3D is very important because basically we use that to identify fractures, natural fractures. We don't have to frack this play to get production. Significant potential resource as identified by Ryder Scott. And the Cane Creek, it's kind of bumbled along since the 1960s, and really in the last, up until the oil price drop in 2014, 2015, it took hold, and we'll talk a bit about that in the future. So an interesting play to be involved in. Highlights, it's pretty low risk. This is a prolific basin, hydrocarbons across the region. So we think fairly low risk. The 3D makes a big difference, and we've got one of the best 3Ds in the area. I think it's an amazing piece of technology for a company of the size of Rose. And we've got a team that was involved in the development of the Cane Creek field to the south. So we've got the guys who did it before, and we can learn from them, which is a great advantage. And there's quite a big reward here. The wells in the Cane Creek flow with a significant IP, and because it's naturally fractured, that doesn't decline as quickly as perhaps some of the other resource plays, and that's obviously got great benefit to the economics. The team, a lot of AIM-listed experience on the board of directors, and Kelly Scott, who's a technical member, and then from the technical team myself. And I want to highlight this chap here, Dave List. Dave was with Fidelity when they basically matured this play 2012 to 2014. He played a fairly pivotal role in characterizing the reservoir and steering their drilling program. So he's now got the data, or at least the intermediate products that we saw last week. And when we get the final processing volume, he'll be working that up and identifying targets. Todd did a super job in the field of ensuring that we acquired some fantastic data. Really, really astounding data. The Paradox Basin, here's the Rose acreage here. This is the overall play, and this is the Cane Creek field. So this is the Gunnison Valley unit, and that's the Cane Creek field that produces from the Cane Creek unit and some of the other units, which I'll show you later on. And really, what was very encouraging to see is that Fidelity, I think they had some troubles. MDU was their parent company, got out in oil and gas, and we see Kirkwood Resources, a private company from Wyoming, very conservative, taking over, and we're aware that they're starting to re-drill back in the Cane Creek field. I think they've drilled one well, and they're on a second well just now. So we've got basically a great analogue, 10 miles to the south that we can learn from and help to basically get after the Gunnison Valley unit. So the Paradox Basin, why is it prospective? Well, in the Paradox Formation, there are a series of organic rich shales with some fantastic TOCs, and these have sourced these fairly significant fields down in the south, Greater Aneth and Lisbon, and we are up in the fairly underexplored northern part of the basin, and we're trying to take that learning from Cane Creek and expand it up into the north. Relevant history, actually the first producer in the Cane Creek was in the 60s, but really it wasn't until 2012, 2014 when Fidelity went in. Dave in particular characterized the reservoir and did an excellent job bringing production up from 100 to 3,000 barrels of oil per day. Obviously there's been a bit of a hiatus, the industry's gone through some turmoil since then, but it's nice to see, as I said, Kirkwood coming in and starting off again. So we're very encouraged to see them back in the field and drilling wells. From a sort of geological perspective, we're looking at an area that is just to the west of some areas of fairly intense salt tectonics. These are areas we want to stay away from. That doesn't help us with our drilling. But we're just on the flank where we'll see some structuration, but we're not in the very heavy structuration close to the salt walls. And as I said, this paradox formation, of which the Cane Creek forms part of it, you have a series of salts and then organic-rich shales interbedded with dolomites, which form the fractured reservoir. And those shales have really world-class TOCs, and that's what sources the oil within the formation. It's quite overpressured, and that's good as well, because when we produce the wells, we get a strong natural pressure drive, which obviously gives us a higher initial production rate. And this is the cross-section through that area. Here's that salt wall, a salt well where the salt's grounded out. And this is the primary reservoir, the Cane Creek, that sits just above. This is the basement, so really this is the Devonian, Carboniferous, and the paradox formation salt. So within this paradox formation there are 20 or so, actually about 25, interbeds of salt and then clastics, shales and dolomites, and these are the potential reservoirs within that paradox formation. The primary one is the Cane Creek, which sits towards the bottom, and what we're looking for are natural fracture sets within that lower part of the reservoir. And here's some of the wells that have been drilled within this area. This is the Cane Creek field, and here's the Cane Creek unit. And it's amazing actually how correlatable these clastics are across this basin, not just up here in the north, but also further to the south. And that's important because this salt, it's not been very well imaged before, and you'll see later when I show some of the images from the Gunnison Valley, we're actually able probably to map some of these out potentially for the first time. So we're not just looking at the Cane Creek, we'll be looking at some of these shallower clastics which have a similar lithology, organic-rich shales which will source oil and gas, and then these dolomites or siltstones which can be fractured and they form the reservoir. So fractures, there's not a huge amount of core data, but there is some. And this is an example from the Cane Creek unit, split into 3 units, the A, the B and the C, very novel. But it's the B that is the unit that we're interested in. It's the unit that is naturally fractured. You can see in these cores, these natural fractures caused by structuration. And instead of having to frack the reservoir, we should be able to target these naturally occurring features, and that's what gives us the high permeability. Typically the rocks, 6 to 8% porosity, fairly low permeability in the matrix, but the actual fractures will give you a reasonable permeability and that excellent production rate that we see at the Cane Creek field. So state-of-the-art 3D seismic shoot. Most of my background has been offshore, so this was a new one for me, seeing an onshore seismic shoot. And it's pretty impressive. We're seeing increasing fold, increasing data density, which gives us the ability to stack, reduce noise, take out multiples and get excellent imaging. And there's been a progression in that. These are the 2 3Ds from the Cane Creek unit, and then these are the parameters for our own Gunnison Valley 3D, which Dawson acquired and really did a fantastic job. Very impressive operation, and we've got great data. So why do we need that 3D? And this is, excuse me. It's really to get these natural fractures. The better the resolution of the data, the better we'll be able to see where those fractures might occur. We'll be able to target them and reduce our drilling cost as well. Obviously you're aware that in a resource type play, that drilling cost in the development wells is a critical part of the economics. So being able to see where you want to drill can obviously reduce that cost. And in particular, reduce perhaps your regret costs or error, wells that really just don't perform. So there's the 3D outline. This is the lease holding, and out here as well, but this is where we're focusing. And there are a couple of wells that we can tie in this area into our 3D. So again, this well here, 2811, has had some production and some shows, so we'll be able to tie these wells into the structures, into the 3D, and then guide our drilling program from then on. So a bit about onshore acquisition. This is a map showing basically a small section of the acquisition plan. You can see the receivers in a line north-south, and then these purple ones, that's where the dynamite was shot. Here's a helicopter taking a small drill rig up onto a more inaccessible part, basically where the trucks can't go, fly in. A small drilling unit drills 40 feet, places the dynamite, and then these fellas here, that's them with a detonator, a way to shoot the data. This is how they actually lay the survey out. They fly in baskets and then work along here and slowly lay out the receivers. In days gone by, guys used to hang off that and they would fly up and down here and run out and lay out the receivers. Luckily now the HSE's kind of got a bit better, and I was really, really impressed with the work of Dawson and their ability to execute the survey. It was a good effort. So these are the Viber-sized trucks, a different way of acquiring data or creating shots, 3 at once, and you can see here how these trails kind of worm their way around, and that's these trucks acquiring data where they can drive across this fairly arid, unpopulated scrubland. The key thing to it we've got to take care of is there's cryptoalgal soils here, which we spent a lot of time and effort turning back to and making sure that these tracks weren't visible, and that was important for the BLM. They were happy when the survey was done and everything was returned back to its natural state. So we've got our receivers out. All the receivers are out for the entire survey, and they are basically recording data from dynamite and from the Viber-sized trucks. So when data is being shot here, we're hearing it in all these receivers that are going north to south. And that's what's giving you the stack of data to give you the data density, and that gives us the accuracy and the detail that we're seeing in the 3D. And then lastly, these are what a recorder looks like. It's basically a little wee box, and there's Matt. And then we've got these geophones, 6 geophones plugged into that box. That's the recording device. And those 6 geophones basically help cancel out noise and again improve the quality of the data. These are exceptionally sensitive. When you drive a truck past, it measures it. But again, there's never trucks all over, so again we can cancel out that sort of noise. Wind noise again can be an issue, but we've managed to overcome all that. So what about the data quality? Well, this was a very quick look at the data. So this is actually a channel feature taken at the base of the paradox, and I've never seen anything like this before below salt. And what we're seeing here is a Carboniferous channel that was present prior to the flooding of the basin. So this is back in the Carboniferous 200 odd million years ago, and this is the last fluvial channel prior to the flooding of the basin. And I think if you can see that in the Southern Gas Basin subsalt, you'd be pretty thrilled. So it's a really nice example, just something we could quickly see from the seismic. So we've got fast-track data. That's what you're seeing here. We expect to get the fully processed volumes within a week, and then we'll get on with interpreting it immediately thereafter. So what we're looking for, well, these are the 3 sorts of geometries that are present and producing at the Cane Creek field. So at the bottom, basement reactivated faults. Here's the molasse, the paradox formation, and this is the base of the granitic basin at the bottom of the paradox. And these faults will come up through the molasse and into the Cane Creek, and that's one structure that is productive. Another one is a fold that's generated by compressional tectonic features, and here you can actually see the fractures that are present both parallel to the axial plane and also perpendicular. And these are the fracture swarms that are trying to target, and that's what gives us that high initial production rate. No need to fracture hydraulically stimulate this well. And then lastly, a salt-related feature, which is related to the big salt movement that happens within this basin, and we're seeing constriction folding on a smaller scale than this. And again, you'll actually get, on a smaller scale, the same fracturing across the crest of the anticlinal surface structure that's shown there. So that's what we're looking for. So what have we seen? Well, the first thing on the quick look, this is the time slice taken pretty much close to the Cane Creek. We haven't interpreted it all, but it gives an approximation. And what we're seeing, these linear features, that's the raw data, that's a very quick interpretation. And this is the cross-section through one of these features. And it's these structural features that will generate fractures. So these are all potential targets that we can evaluate as the time goes on in the coming weeks, and hopefully generate some drilling targets. So that's quite exciting and analogous to what we see at Cane Creek to the south. And then secondly, this is the bit that we're thinking about. These are probably constriction folds, but actually some of them may be structural and related to thrust faults. This is where we need to take time. We've had very little time to see this, but it's great to see structures really pervasive across the survey. And here you can see the constriction folds, and you can also see them shallower. So there's the top of the paradox. Each one of these bright reflectors is a change from salt to these clastics. Clastics contain the shales and the dolomites, and they could be fractured along the crest of these. So our evaluation will be going through this to see which of the units look best, which of the structures look best, and hopefully propose them for drilling. So the story so far is we've acquired data. It's great quality, and now we're starting to look at it and we're seeing structures that we've seen and note and are present in Crane Creek. So basically I think we're in a great position given where we are today. So, yep, acquisition, safe, efficient acquisition. We got it under budget and ahead of schedule, and I would say the guys who were involved in the shoot should be lauded for their performance. I was really impressed with that. Initial data quality is excellent, and even within the salt we'll be able to hopefully map some of these shallower intervals, and that just increases the potential target list that we can go after. And we're nearly done with processing. Target ID, just starting off. There's certainly constriction faulting. There's certainly basement faulting. It's definitely not as structurally complex as down at Cane Creek, but there are certainly structures there. The structural flexure is not so evident in this quick look, but we've got a bit of work to do to really unravel this and decide where we're going to target. But I think, again, where we are today, great data, structures present, it's a good position to be in. Gross, as per Ryder Scott, a pretty significant resource in place. Prospective resources currently, and once we think we tie some of the wells in, we'll see where we sit with that in the future. And really, this is the composite breakdown. These are all these different zones. There's the Cane Creek at the bottom, so you get an idea of what the resources potential of each one of these clastics. Each one of these contains a mixture of black, organic rich shales, and these dolomites which can be fractured or which are fractured and may be potential targets. So stacked potential pretty much across the area. There's the 3D down in the southwest. So what about the area itself? Well, that's the beauty about doing work onshore US. There's a massive service industry. We've got an oil services hub about an hour and a half to the east in Grand Junction. There is gathering systems within the area, and that basically makes it pretty easy to develop this should we be successful with the exploration and appraisal drilling. So again, one of the attractions of the US is just this readiness to get wells onto production. If we were to drill a well next year, we'd have it on in production pretty shortly after it was completed. So it's a real advantage to being out here. In terms of economics, this was the output from Ryder Scott for the whole play. And I mean, if we just achieve a fraction of this, there's a significant potential within our area. And again, here you can see the impact of well cost. And there's two things that we benefit from here. The first is that Fidelity and now Kirkwood have drilled. We're looking at a dozen years of drilling history that we can refer back to and understand what they did well and what they did maybe not so well. And then also we've got this 3D, high-spec, high-resolution data which we hope can make our well placement more effective than has been done before. So we've got a nice foot up compared to our predecessors. In terms of the work plan, this is where we are in time, and we thought we would just be finishing the shoot. Obviously that's gone ahead of schedule, and actually in terms of activity, we're just about to start the interpretations. We're about 6 weeks ahead, and we expect sort of, I think, 5 to 8 weeks for interpretation, give or take. It's not a simple area. It's worth spending time on this to make sure we make the most of the data that we have. And once we've defined targets, then we can be, I think, 3 to 6 months potentially towards drilling. Again, assuming that we can get rigs, which I don't think will be a problem, but obviously we want to optimize that and reduce costs again. And the key part of the timeline is the difference between state lands and BLM lands. There are different regulatory processes for the different ownerships of the different land types. So that's something we have to build into our schedule. So what about the future? Well, I think the Gunnison Valley, Cane Creek, and actually shallower clastics represent, high value play. There's no doubt this is a fairly significant petroleum province, and it's a new way of looking at this petroleum province with this new type of 3D. We're continuing the Gunnison Valley area evaluation, and I think also we're going to be looking at portfolio development. I think there is a broad opportunity set in the US. There are high level of deal flow, varying levels of sizes, different types of targets, which we can try to access. And again, there's a degree of herd mentality here. Everybody's chasing, you go to the Permian Basin, pay top dollar, mix with the majors, or there's a huge petroleum basin, huge petroleum systems. We can look for things that are perhaps a little less fashionable, but equally potentially value additive to a company like Rose. Okay, so that was a very quick run through. Exciting stuff, great data, and we're looking forward to working it up some more.